Welcome back to MHO Hotel Insight. I am joined here with Keshan Patel, Chief Operating Officer of MHO Hotels. He is joining us with, of course, Michael Garner of Garner and Ginsberg. MHO is such a different type of organization in terms of franchise agreements. And you as a Chief Operating Officer, what's your take on what really makes it different? What's the DNA, so to speak?
So I think Mahendra touched on it really well. It's the family relationship that we have with all of our hoteliers. So what we try and do is provide that personal connection. So like Mahendra mentioned, we give our personal contact details and we are there to guide you every step of the way. So like Mahendra has the 30 plus years of experience, he's been on all the boards, but he will personally meet every hotel owner that is part of MHO Hotels, and any of those hotel owners will be able to contact him directly and ask for his guidance, his assistance, and I think that's something that sets us apart from the rest, Fred. I don't see many franchisors currently doing that. It's always a hand me off to another lower level employee, whereas what I've realized from other hotel owners and speaking to them is they want that personal connection, they want that family connection.
So if I can just interrupt and point out that MZ had an inspiration, I think, in deciding to contact us to prepare the franchise disclosure document and franchise agreement, because we only serve franchisees and very rarely get involved with franchisors. So we took all of our knowledge about the frustrations that franchisees have, plus input from Keshan and MZ in constructing the documents that level the playing field between the franchisor and the franchisee in the MHO system.
That's great. And I know you were going to talk about probably striving for harmony between the Z and the ZOR.
Basically, that's what I was going to say is me and Mahendra actually sat me down and said, this family connection and this bond that we're going to have with our hotel owners, he said, whether we have 1,000 properties, whether we have 10,000 properties on board, we are going to maintain that connection, and that is going to be the backbone of MHO Hotels.
I realize there are some very tough requirements in a franchise agreement to be aware of. You know, you can talk about territory protection, liquidated damages, etc. Michael, with your experience, how would you speak to those in terms of guiding a listener, viewer, on looking to buy their first franchise?
Well, let me talk a little bit about the hotel industry and a little bit about franchises in general. In the hotel industry, one of the things that you mentioned that's important to watch out for are liquidated damages. Typically, when a franchisee signs a hotel franchise agreement, it's for 10 or 20 years. And life changes, circumstances change, people's lives change. And it may be necessary during that 1 or 2 decade long period to get out of the franchise agreement or go to a different brand. That is not permitted typically in most hotel franchise agreements unless the franchisee pays a very substantial sum to the franchisor known as liquidated damages. And we're talking in the range of hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's also important in terms of going into a hotel franchise agreement to look at the fees and responsibilities that the franchisee has. This is something that will be in what's called item 6 of the franchise disclosure document, so that today in a contemporary hotel franchise agreement, the franchisee can incur fees for not doing certain things, as well as fees charged in order to do certain things. And it's important that the buyer understand what all of those are. If you're outside of the hotel industry, what I would say to a prospective franchisee is, number one, see if you can get some good advice from a franchise lawyer, somebody who knows this business on what that agreement provides for. Be careful about startup operations that don't have a track record, and look for franchisors that have been in the business for some period of time, and always talk to existing franchisees to get the inside scoop.
So Michael, hypothetically, I'm looking at a franchise, and now I'm looking at a franchise agreement, and I'm saying, gee, I know there's something in here that can be negotiated. Is there kind of a rule of thumb of what one should be looking at in terms of the provisions?
A lot of that, Fred, is going to depend on the strength of the franchisor. Certainly, on the one hand, if you're dealing with a McDonald's or a Burger King or a Wendy's, you really can't expect to negotiate much, because, after all, you're paying for that name, and you're paying to be just like every other McDonald's on the planet. But on the other hand, in the hotel industry, if you are dealing with even some of the large brands or the small brands, there are opportunities to negotiate a lot of times on the front end with property improvement plans, or how much money you have to put into your property to conform to that brand's standards. There can be some negotiation sometimes on royalties for some period of time, but really, like almost every other bargaining situation, it's going to depend on the relative strength of the parties.
How about disputes? Is there some type of mechanism in a franchise agreement?
Disputes in franchising come up in three different situations. Number one, at the outset, particularly if the franchisee feels that the franchisor has defrauded it. And this actually happens more often than you may think, particularly when franchisors make promises about how much money the franchisee will make. Number two, disputes come up in the middle of the agreement when the franchisor wants to change something. And the franchisee may be perfectly happy with that, and they don't want to make that change. And then finally, disputes come up at the end of the relationship when the franchisor wants to end it and take over that business, and the franchisee wants to continue. Now, in the old days, what we did was we rushed into court and we sued. But franchisors have put a number of provisions in their agreements in recent years that require the parties to sit down and talk about their differences. Sometimes they do this in mediation, which is a supervised negotiating session with a trained mediator in charge. And if that doesn't work out, then you can go into court, and then you can go into arbitration. But I will say that these, what they call dispute resolution provisions, such as requiring negotiation or mediation, have gone a long way toward ending disputes that are relatively minor and that can be worked out between business people, and reducing the number of times that franchisees and franchisors end up before a judge or an arbitrator.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you, Keshen. We'll be back after these messages for more of MHO Hotel Insight.